Welcome to Critter Crusades, the show about ordinary people on extraordinary missions to help animals. I'm Missy Woodward. Thank you for joining us. I'm here today with an incredible woman. She's involved in many different areas of animal advocacy, Elizabeth Oreck. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So great to see you. You are involved in so many fabulous organizations and doing so much incredible work. I'm so honored to have you here, actually.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, I met you a couple weeks back, and I saw you speaking at a LA Animal Services Commission meeting. I'd like to actually roll that tape now so that people can get a little bit of an idea of who you are and where you've been, and then we can go back and talk a little bit more about the details.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Elizabeth Oreck. I'm here in support of the spay and neuter ordinance. I'm a co-founder of the Coalition for Pets and Public Safety, which furnished the first mobile spay and neuter clinic in Los Angeles, and which the city uses to go into low-income communities and offer free or low-cost spay and neuter and vaccinations. At this point, we've done about 20,000 animals. We have hundreds of people lining up in advance. We have to turn them away and give them vouchers. It obviously works. It's a service that is effective, and I would like to see more low-cost spay and neuter, not only in Los Angeles, but throughout the state, although we do already have a lot. To address Commissioner Reardon's concern about the pet shops, I am also a former director of SPCA LA. I opened and supervised 4 pet adoption centers in local malls, which, in addition to increasing adoptions, also meant that there could be no traditional pet stores in those malls selling dogs and cats. At SPCA LA, we spayed at 8 weeks. Most SPCAs and humane societies do as well. I have yet to see any physical consequences, only benefits to early spay and neuter. Dogs and cats go through their first heat by 6 months, so anything later than that defeats the purpose of having a spay and neuter bill. And I'm thrilled that the euthanasia numbers in Los Angeles are going down, but 18,108 euthanasias in LA last year is 18,108 too many. And education alone is clearly not cutting it. We need to also add mandatory spay and neuter to our services and get those numbers down to 0. Thank you.
Well, that says it all, really, in a lot of ways. 18,108 animals is 18,108 animals too many that are dying in the system just in LA alone.
6 shelters.
Just 6 shelters. That
Right.
doesn't include the county. It doesn't include all the
Humane
surrounding
societies, exactly.
Exactly. And you're involved, and that's just one area you're involved in. You're seeing this on a global aspect because you're involved in other areas as well, such as the IFAW. I believe you said you're on the regional council for that. That
Yes.
is, can you explain a little bit more about that?
IFAW is the International Fund for Animal Welfare. They have programs all around the world, animal welfare programs, and one of the big programs is a community-led animal welfare program. And it started in South Africa by a wonderful woman who had just seen too many dogs and cats running in the streets and procreating, and she started this amazing program in a place where animal welfare is not exactly a top priority, understandably. And that led to this program being spread in other countries like Bali, Dominican Republic, California is trying to implement a program, and it's a very interesting thing to see how a spay and neuter program in a country that doesn't have a lot of resources can be so effective versus a country that has so many resources and yet so much controversy about the subject.
We have millions of dollars that people are arguing about, saying, how can we use this? How can we raise more money? Tell us a little bit about what happened that one trip you had, I think, to Bali, out in the fields, what you saw.
Well, that was amazing because I come from a place where people are carrying their little dogs around in $400 coach carriers, and they're wearing diamond-studded collars, and you know, we obviously love our animals, but we anthropomorphize them and dress them up and take them everywhere we go. And in Bali, the dogs are just running wild. And I had been there previously and seen this, and it breaks my heart, although if you are going to be a stray dog anywhere, Bali's really the place to be because, you know, they've got the beach and they obviously are having a good time, but they're all pregnant. Every female you see is pregnant, and a lot of them are emaciated, and there's you know, when you're on an island situation, there's just no room, there's only limited space, and yet if they keep procreating, then there's just more and more of them. And it's not a top priority because it's not a wealthy, you know, jurisdiction at all. And so the second time I went back, I knew about this program, the Bali Street Dog program that IFAW was supporting, and I went along with a team of, basically they capture, spay, neuter, and release in about an hour. And they would have these makeshift clinics, literally out in the middle of a field, maybe under a thatched hut roof, if they were lucky to get somebody to offer that. And they would hang the drip, and they would wash and sterilize their tools in a bucket, and they would lay them out on a blanket, and they'd do the surgery, and then they'd put them in a recovery pen for a half an hour, and when the dog woke up, the dog, you know, ran off and started playing with its friends again. I mean, it was incredible to see what can be done with so few resources as long as the willingness is there. And yet, you know, we have so much controversy about spay and neuter here, and whether it should be done, and whether it's a personal property issue, and whether, you know, dogs want to be altered or want to have sex or want to be pregnant. And it's interesting to see how much more difficult it is to accomplish the same goals.
I think in some of those countries too, they understand starvation and they understand birth and death. They see those things every day. We have sort of a sterilized world. If we don't want to see something in the world, we just don't look at it.
Right.
And it's very pushed away. I know in some of the countries, and I'm curious, let's say in Bali, for instance, in other countries, they do just mass poisonings to clean up those countries.
Right.
They'll just, once or twice a year, they'll tell the Americans or the wealthy people that have animals, pull your animals in for a couple of days, we're doing the poisoning. So they poison. So they go across the board, nothing, you know, it's not just the dogs and the cats, especially the many, many feral cats. They get the bunnies, the squirrels, everything that's walking the earth that eats something is killed during that time. So that's why I think organizations like that are so important. I know you're also so involved here in Los Angeles in a couple of different organizations. You mentioned on the tape SPCA, you got involved with different spay-neuter clinics there. I know you're also, as it said on the tape, the co-founder and also on the board still for the Coalition for Pets and Public Safety with the spay mobiles. Tell us a little bit more about the mobile spay-neuter clinic, how that originated, how people, let's say in other cities, could duplicate those efforts and do it and have the success that it has been here.
Well, other cities have, which is fantastic. It started for us in about around 2000, end of 1999. Dan Knapp, who was the previous general manager of Animal Services, a woman named Erica Brunson, me, my husband Gavin, and a woman named Terry Masalero all got together and tried to figure out what we could do about this pet overpopulation problem, particularly in Los Angeles, which, because it has a higher population of people, has a higher population of animals. And we were just killing thousands and thousands and thousands a month. And it wasn't enough to offer spay and neuter services in the clinics or in the shelters or fund adoption programs. We needed to be able to go to the people in their communities and offer this service. So we came up with the idea of a spay mobile, which was the first spay mobile in Los Angeles, and it was designed by Jeffrey Katzenberg. And by June of 2002, it was a full-fledged spay and neuter clinic that would go into lower income communities, offer low cost and free spay and neuter and vaccinations. And we had and continue to have people lining up in the morning, you know, hours before it gets there. It'll park at a parking lot of a Kmart or a Target 6 days a week by the city of Los Angeles. We lease it to them for $1 a year, and it's run by a woman who runs the Amanda Foundation. And people come with their cats tucked inside their sweaters, or their dog in their shopping cart, or tied to a scarf, or, you know, however they can get there, they get there. And it got to the point where we were having to turn people away and give them spay-neuter vouchers. And at this point, we've done about 20,000. It's become more efficient every year, and now we're doing about 7,000 a year, which is an enormous number if you think generationally speaking, because one dog can have several litters over its lifetime, and all of those puppies can have litters over its lifetime. And so really what you're talking about is thousands and thousands of dogs that could be reproduced from the one that you're spaying or neutering.
I know I told a woman yesterday, I said, you know, you've spayed 3 cats now, 3 females, somebody I was helping, and I said, you have prevented hundreds into thousands of
Absolutely.
cats just on those 3. And because they are feral, they're going to be
Right.
out there reproducing, and people don't know one area can go out of control, and it can just cause a huge spin that can...
Right, and people don't realize that.
They don't know.
They don't realize that, and they don't realize how early dogs and cats go through their first heat, and how early spay and neuter is so critical for that reason. And that's another controversy, is about how old a dog or cat should be before it should be spayed. And at SPCA and at most of the clinics, that most of the vets can and are doing them at 8 weeks and have been for over a decade, and it's much healthier because they don't experience the same kind of cancers, and they don't obviously go through heat and have puppies. And I hear a lot of people say, well, I want my child to experience the miracle of birth, so we're going to let our dog have puppies. But they're not going to keep all 8 or 9 of those dogs. And so then what happens? Those dogs end up in the shelter. They end up being given away to people who now wouldn't have possibly adopted from a shelter. And so it resonates much more broadly than people realize. And so the Spay Mobile has been an incredible success, and there's now another one operating that Sam Simon runs, and we are trying to get a third one up and running, because it's become, you know, a very, very valuable service, and people obviously want that service.
How do you get the word out to, especially the low-income areas that might not know about it, how do you get the word out to them that this service is available?
LA Animal Services advertises it. They post the calendar. Like I said, it runs 6 days a week. So now the word of mouth is such that people are showing up, even residents of the county who technically we don't service. We service just the city, but we still do the people who show up from the county, and we offer the vouchers as well. I'd like to see more operating just in LA because we have so much of a need for it, but they're also starting to build them in other communities in California and outside of California, and I think that that's critical, because that really addresses the argument that you're punishing, you know, low-income families by making spay and neuter mandatory, or making it, you know, a much more pervasive.
Well, I think, again, it goes back to they understand starvation, death, and birth, and they're the ones that see, you know what, I can't handle this. I have 6 kids. I have that. I really don't want any more. I don't know what to do about it. The kids love this animal. What can we do? If they had a choice, they would do it. And they may have just been given that animal by somebody. They didn't, or the animal just walked up on their doorstep and they were kind enough to take it in. So they don't know, you know, the next steps.
I know, that's how I got a lot of mine.
Yes, exactly. Now, you don't just sit there and do a lot of things about legislation or take trips to Bali to do things. You actually get your hands dirty. I know you do that with wildlife. Tell me a little bit more about your experience with the California Wildlife Center.
I am a wildlife rehabilitator with CWC in Malibu, and we take in injured, orphaned, and imperiled native wildlife, and that means everything from hawks to bobcats to deer to coyote to songbirds, marine mammals, squirrels, possums, any native species. And we rehab them and release them back into the wild as quickly as possible. And that's also an interesting consequence of the dog and cat overpopulation problem, because a lot of the animals that come in as victims of dog or cat attacks. And so again, it resonates in a much more broad area than you even realize. So we get in cats or dogs that have attacked squirrels, and we get in birds that have been attacked by cats, and we get in, we see hawks that have attacked cats that have been let outside. So all of it is very much related in terms of the effects of having too many animals.
And also because we live in a city/urban/wildlife area, very unusual in Los Angeles compared to, let's say, another type of city, the two meet. And they're constantly in conflict.
They're not only meeting, they're crossing each other's boundaries, because we're encroaching on space that was normally, territory of wildlife and wildlife alone, and so the wildlife is having to come down into the human space, and then you get into issues with the mountain lions and the coyote, and people want to eradicate those animals from their communities, but then they don't realize that it's a cycle, and that it's, you're talking about if you get rid of the coyotes, then people say, well, why do I have so many rats now in my yard?
Exactly.
And it's because you've interrupted the circle of nature. And so what we try and promote is positive, peaceful coexistence with nature. And so there's a lot of education, as there always is with animal welfare involved, and we just try and rehab and release right back to where they came from as quickly as possible. But it is very hands-on working in the hospital. You never know what is going to show up on the doorstep. You never know if you're going to get a call. Animal Services may bring a deer that's been hit by a car, or we may get a call that a sea lion is stranded on the beach in Malibu, or someone may bring in a box with a tiny, barn owl that fell out of a nest. So it's a challenge. It's a constant challenge.
What was one of your more interesting experiences of actual handling? What type of animal, and what were you doing for the animal?
Goodness. Well, I've had hawks that I've been trying to hand feed or wing wrap that have dug their talons into my fingers, which is a really unpleasant experience. Right. You wear all the equipment, you wear the goggles, you wear the heavy leather gloves, but to have those talons, which literally have the force of hundreds and hundreds of pounds, that's what those hawks do, is they tear their prey apart. And they curl, and so once they get into your skin and then they clamp down, that's a really unpleasant experience.
So if you see one flying, you don't just put your hand up and
go, don't put your hand down and say,
okay?
yeah. But we had a peregrine falcon that had been in a fire that we had to rehab for 6 months. We get hawks that have been shot, and they're federally protected. So the first conviction, the federal conviction that we experienced was the maximum. The gentleman got a $5,000 fine. He got jail time. And that's good, because that sends a message that this isn't just a sporting game. These animals aren't there just for our own amusement, and we have to learn to live peacefully among them.
Now, you're also involved on the board of Pets 90210, and I know that's dealing with rescues and adoptions. And you're also involved in legislation that you've been talking about, and the most important thing about spay and neuter. How important is legislation? Why should it be there to help enforce spay and neuter?
Well, unfortunately, we can't experience compliance on a state level unless we have laws in place. And this applies to everything. The seatbelt law was something that was very much a very controversial issue, because people said, it's my body, I should be allowed to decide whether or not to wear a seatbelt. But when it affects the rest of the community, because we have to pay higher health insurance just to compensate for people who are injured in car accidents, I wouldn't go faster than 70 miles an hour probably, whether there was a law or not, and yet there are people who, because there are laws in place, they comply. And there will always be non-compliance. We have laws against drunk driving and murder and all of those things, and yet there's still non-compliance. And yet, if you don't have the law in place, then you don't solve the problem. And I saw very clearly at SPCA what that law meant, because I would adopt animals would come in, I'd find homes for them as fast as I could, but it was like being in a boat with a hole in the bottom, and you can just try and find, because you can bail water, find homes for animals, but until you plug the hole, they're just going to keep coming in, and you're not solving the problem, you're just putting a Band-Aid solution on it. And plugging the hole in this situation is spaying and neutering. And there's a lot of people willing to do it, but there's a lot of people who are not. And some of the factors are the expense, which is why the low-cost spay and neuter becomes so important. A lot of them feel that animals are personal property, which is an argument I don't understand at all, because a refrigerator to me is personal property. Right. It's not a living, breathing thing that that experiences pain and suffering and that can reproduce, which your refrigerator is not going to do on its own. Right. So there are a lot of again, going back to the anthropomorphizing, you know, there are people who feel that animals want to be out procreating and want to be, you know, unaltered. And those things have never been proven to be true. And so what we have to do is go to the source of the problem, and that is spay and neuter. And we have to, unfortunately, make it a statewide mandate, because otherwise people are not going to do it enough to you know, to bring the numbers down. And right now in California, we have 1 million animals coming into our city and county shelters every single year, and over half of them are killed. And these are healthy, adoptable animals that have done nothing wrong. They just don't have any place to go. And they're euthanized, they're sent to rendering plants, they're turned into dog food. We're feeding it back to our dogs, we're turning our dogs into cannibals, and it's not right. There's something very barbaric about the system. And on top of all of that cruelty, and a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that that's going on, a lot of people don't know that that's going on top of all of that, we're paying as taxpayers for the privilege, because it costs $250 to $300 million a year in California.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Just city and county shelters to house and euthanize so many animals.
And I understand there's big business involved in rendering.
Oh.
It's a major trade industry.
It
with
is.
Their own magazines, their own conventions, their own everything, and people don't understand, and they are so worried about mad cow and all these other issues.
Right.
A lot of that goes along with the rendering, things that people do not want to hear about. They look at animal advocates, animal rights people, and they say, oh, they're whack jobs,
Right.
or they are, you know, really out of control. And when they have someone educated like yourself come in and talk about these issues, I know I saw you also in a discussion with someone that had very few facts on the subject, and you know, when confronted with facts, they can't answer.
Right.
Because they don't have the facts. They're just very heated about things. People tend to be heated in general about subjects that they're not totally. It's very on the same line as politics. You know, they just get very heated. They don't
Right.
come to a resolution. And I think that's what's so wonderful about all these different groups that you're involved with. They find solutions in many different areas. They're looking for their solution that they may have funding for, or they may have more experience with. It's though pulling all these groups together and saying, what's our main thing? I think legislation is one place that you can get a lot of these groups together to say, now we can agree on this. We can agree that this really is the problem. I mean, you can do a lot of things to cancer, you can do all sorts of treatments, but if you don't find the core of the cancer, find out which organ it's in, like you
Right.
said again with the boat, if you can't find that main place, and we've found it, we know it is with procreating animals. And it's just going to continue to cost us. And not only the cost, I turn around and go, look at the savings. I know every dollar spent on spay and neuter, I think, is now going to $18.50.
Save, yes, exactly.
$18.50 for every dollar spent on
Right.
spay and neuter. We have to look at savings in a state. We have to look at this as a business, a finance issue as well, because this is where money is just going out the door, and that's something we can't have.
And it's
in
not
any
going
large-
to anything good. It's going to killing animals.
Right.
And that's the problem. Like you said, it's a very emotional issue. And everyone can agree on the problem. When you go to these animal committee meetings or anything where there's different groups represented, they all agree there's a problem. What they don't agree on is the solution. And so you have people who share the same goals, who can't agree on how to accomplish them. And so you get infighting among the people who should be on the same side. And that lack of solidarity is just completely counterproductive. And then you have people complaining about the problem, not coming up with a solution, and then it's just wasted energy that could be rechanneled into coming together, finding a solution that works for everyone. But when you're dealing with animal issues, people are very emotional, and they have different ideas about what's appropriate and what's, you know, going to be effective. And aside from all the other issues that people bring into it about personal property and about, you know, whether or not anybody, the government, should be telling them what to do, you know, it's a difficult task. But we're just going to plug away at it and hope that we can reach a point where at least we're bringing the numbers down, because it's very difficult to see, if you've worked in the shelters, to come in and see all these great animals, and they know that they're there, they know that you're someone who could possibly get them out, and the look in their eyes as you walk through, and then you go back the next week and half of them are gone. And for me to have to be told, you know, well, we had to euthanize them, that's just heartbreaking. And to try and wrap your head around the numbers of 500,000 a year is just even more than you can conceptualize.
In these last moments, what are some of the, what's just something right off the top is the best suggestion people should do in their own lives that they could do to make just some small impact?
Spay or neuter their pet.
Yeah.
I know it's trite. It sounds, you've heard it a million times before, but that is the single most critical thing that we can do to curb the pet overpopulation problem. Spay or neuter your pet and rescue a pet rather than buy.
And also, I think, get involved.
Absolutely.
Like yourself, get
Absolutely.
involved. Find
On
something
any
that you're
level.
good at.
Right.
And you can just make a difference, even if it's 4 hours a month. I know all these groups you're involved with probably have programs, volunteer programs. They can look them up on the internet, find out resources as to, you know, we're having a volunteer event this weekend. You can go be there. You can
Absolutely.
You can write your politicians.
Absolutely.
These are small things.
Absolutely.
It looks like, but I know you've been involved in a campaign where it's made just amazing results by having people write in and make phone calls.
Sure.
I know on some legislation for animals in California, spay-neuter legislation, it's broken the phones, you know,
Yeah, literally.
broken fax
Literally.
machines, everything. So it's one of those issues that you go, I can make a difference. I have a voice. And if people want to have a voice for animals, they can look at someone like you and say, she's on boards. People can serve as board members too. People know in business what board members do. They do the same thing in animal advocacy welfare organizations.
Right.
They do the same thing. They take their personal experience in the business world, apply it to something where someone else needs help, if it's good in financial, if it's good in public relations or whatever. I want to thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you so much.
And I do know that, you know, you're going to be involved in these organizations from now on, and I really wish you the best in all of your activities, and know that, you know, you're making a major difference. You are one of those crusaders that's out there that we're so thankful for.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Sure. Thank you for joining us on Crusades, the show about ordinary people on extraordinary missions.